Right now, as you listen to this, 99% of people are losing. They're hustling harder, moving faster, shouting louder, and getting nowhere. They believe the lie that power comes from aggression, from constant motion, from making noise. But you're different. You chose this audiobook, and that choice means you're ready for the truth they've been hiding. In the next 2 hours, everything you thought you knew about power will be destroyed and rebuilt. Because the silent warriors are about to reveal their secret, and once you learn it, you'll never see the world the same way again. Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone told you to slow down, to do less, to be quiet? Probably never, because that's not what they teach. They teach the opposite. Hustle culture, grind mentality, be the loudest voice in the room, make your presence known, never stop moving. Sound familiar? Of course it does, because that's the operating system they installed in your brain. Here's what they don't tell you. That operating system is designed to keep you exhausted, distracted, controllable. Think about it. When you're constantly busy, you never have time to think. When you're always reacting, you never get to plan. When you're making noise, you can't hear the signals others are broadcasting. You become predictable, manageable, easy to defeat. The average person wakes up and immediately checks their phone. 37 notifications, 15 emails, 23 messages. Their nervous system spikes before their feet hit the floor. They spend the entire day in reaction mode, responding to other people's priorities, fighting fires, moving fast but going nowhere. By evening, they're depleted. They collapse on the couch, scroll through content, and repeat the cycle tomorrow. Elite performers do something radically different. They wake up to silence. No phone for the first hour. They sit, they breathe. They observe their own mind. Before the world makes demands, they decide what matters. They move through the day with intention, not reaction. While everyone else is sprinting in circles, they're walking straight to the target. And here's the paradox that breaks most people's brains. They accomplish more by doing less. You've been taught that power is loud, that strength means domination, that winning requires aggression. But look at nature. Look at reality. The mountain doesn't shout, yet it stands for millennia. The ocean doesn't hurry, yet it shapes continents. The predator doesn't announce its arrival. It waits, it watches. It strikes once, decisively, then returns to stillness. Ancient warriors understood this. The samurai spent hours in meditation before battle, not because they were soft, because they knew something you're just beginning to discover. The mind that is still sees opportunities the busy mind misses. The body that is calm moves faster when action is required. The warrior who has mastered stillness doesn't waste energy on unnecessary motion. Every action becomes precise, efficient, devastating. Here's the truth nobody wants you to know. The most powerful people on the planet are not the loudest. They're the quietest. Warren Buffett sits in an office in Omaha reading for hours. No chaos, no urgency, just observation and patience. When he moves, markets shift. Jeff Bezos famously schedules time for puttering, doing nothing productive, letting his mind wander. Mark Zuckerberg wears the same clothes every day to eliminate decision fatigue, preserve mental energy for what matters. These aren't accidents. These are patterns. The elite have discovered what monks and philosophers knew thousands of years ago. There is a type of power that doesn't come from force. It comes from stillness, from presence, from the ability to not react when everyone else is panicking. Most people hear this and their conditioning kicks in. They think, that's nice philosophy, but the real world requires hustle. Wrong. The real world rewards efficiency, not effort. Strategy, not struggle. You want proof? Look at your own life. Think about the times you made your worst decisions. Were you calm? Or were you stressed, rushed, reacting? Now think about your best decisions. The ones that changed everything. I'd bet money you made them from a place of clarity, calm, stillness. The truth is this. You've been conditioned to confuse motion with progress, noise with power, busyness with productivity. And that conditioning is precisely what keeps you trapped. Because when you're always moving, you never build momentum in any single direction. When you're always speaking, you never hear the information that could change the game. When you're always busy, you never have time to think strategically. Let me tell you about a concept the ancient Taoists called Wu Wei. It translates roughly as effortless action or non-doing. But it's not about laziness. It's about aligning yourself with the natural flow of things. about waiting for the right moment instead of forcing every moment, about understanding that sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Picture a chess master. An amateur sees the board and wants to move immediately, make something happen. The master sits back, studies, waits. 10 moves ahead are already calculated. When the master finally moves, it looks simple, almost effortless. But that single move collapses the opponent's entire position. That's Wu Wei. That's the power of stillness. Here's what most people get wrong. They think stillness means inaction. It doesn't. Stillness is the foundation from which all effective action emerges. Think of a martial artist. Before the strike, there's stillness. The strike itself is explosive, fast, precise, but it comes from stillness. Without that foundation, you just have wild flailing, wasted energy, easily countered. Average people are in constant motion, achieving minimal results. Elite performers are mostly still, punctuated by precise, devastating action. See the difference? One approach burns energy constantly and accomplishes little. The other conserves energy and strikes with maximum impact. You want to know why you feel exhausted all the time? Because you're fighting battles that don't need to be fought, responding to provocations that should be ignored, engaging in conflicts that serve no purpose. The silent warrior watches all of this with detached amusement. While you're burning out, they're building power. While you're reacting, they're planning. While you're exhausted, they're executing. Here's a principle that will change everything if you let it sink in. The first principle of power is conservation, not of money, not of time, of attention and energy. Your attention is your most valuable resource. Where it goes, your energy follows. And where your energy goes, your life follows. Most people spray their attention in 1,000 directions. Social media, news, drama, other people's problems. Distractions disguised as priorities. Elite performers guard their attention like a dragon guards treasure. They know that attention is finite. Once it's spent, it's gone. So they become ruthlessly selective. They say no to almost everything. Not because they're arrogant, because they understand something crucial. Every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that matters. Think about your last week. How much of your attention went to things that actually moved your life forward? How much was wasted on reactions, distractions, other people's agendas? Be honest. If you're like most people, maybe 10% of your attention went to what truly matters. The other 90%? Noise. The silent warrior operates differently. They identify the 3 to 5 things that will genuinely transform their situation. Then they ruthlessly eliminate everything else. Not someday, today. They stop attending meetings that waste time. They stop engaging with people who drain energy. They stop consuming content that clutters the mind. They create space, and in that space, power accumulates. Here's the second principle, the one that sounds crazy until you test it. Doing less creates more. Your brain has been wired to reject this. You've been taught that more effort equals more results. Sometimes true, usually not, because most effort is misdirected. Imagine pushing against a locked door for hours. Lots of effort, 0 results. Now imagine finding the key and turning it gently. Minimal effort, door opens. That's the difference between force and flow, between aggression and strategy, between the average approach and the elite approach. The average person says, I need to work harder, put in more hours, hustle more. The elite performer asks, what's the one thing that, if I did it excellently, would make everything else easier or unnecessary? See the difference? One multiplies effort, the other multiplies results. You're probably starting to feel resistance right now. That's normal. Your conditioning is fighting back. It's screaming, this sounds weak. Real winners grind. Real power comes from domination. That voice, that's not you. That's the programming. And it's time to delete it. Let me give you a mental image. Picture 2 fighters. Fighter 1 is aggressive, throwing punch after punch. Lots of movement, lots of energy expenditure. Looks impressive to untrained eyes. Fighter 2 is still, almost unnaturally calm, watching, waiting. Then, when Fighter 1 overextends, exhausted from all that motion, Fighter 2 moves once. A single strike, precise, devastating. Fight over. That's the difference between operating from aggression and operating from stillness. Aggression burns bright and fast. Stillness endures and strikes when victory is certain. Most people are Fighter 1. They look busy. They feel productive. But they're just exhausting themselves. The silent warrior is Fighter 2. Patient, observant, lethal when the moment arrives. Here's what nobody tells you about power. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need to be the loudest voice. Power that has to prove itself isn't power. It's insecurity wearing a mask. True power is quiet, certain, unshakable. It moves through the world like a submarine through the ocean, invisible on the surface, unstoppable beneath it. Think about the people you know who talk the most about how powerful they are, how successful, how dominant. Now think about the actual most competent person you know, the one who gets real results. Dollars to donuts, the talker accomplishes little. The quiet one changes everything. That's not coincidence. That's pattern. That's law. The ancient Taoists observed nature and discovered something profound. The softest things in the world overcome the hardest. Water is soft, flexible. It conforms to whatever container it's placed in. Seems weak, right? But give water time and it carves through mountains, reshapes coastlines, destroys civilizations. The stone is hard, rigid, seems strong, but it breaks, cracks, crumbles. Softness, patience, and consistency defeat hardness, aggression, and force. Every single time. This is the secret they hid from you, because if you understood this principle, you'd become dangerous. You'd stop being controllable. You'd stop exhausting yourself on their treadmill. You'd start building real power, the kind that doesn't burn out, the kind that compounds, the kind that makes you unstoppable. So here's where we are. You've been lied to about the nature of power. You've been taught to value motion over momentum, noise over signal, aggression over strategy, and that lie has kept you exhausted, frustrated, and stuck. But now you know. The silent warrior doesn't fight harder. The silent warrior fights smarter, doesn't move more, moves better, doesn't shout louder, doesn't need to. In the next chapter, we're going to look at the people who mastered this. The samurais who meditated before battle, the CEOs who schedule emptiness, the chess masters who win in silence, the billionaires who move markets with a whisper. You'll see the pattern, you'll understand the method, and you'll begin to recognize the silent warriors all around you, the ones you've been overlooking because they don't make noise. But here's what you need to understand right now. This isn't theory. This isn't philosophy for monks in caves. This is the most practical knowledge you'll ever receive. Because once you master stillness, everything changes. Decisions become clearer. Actions become more effective. Results multiply. And the exhaustion that's been draining you for years, it vanishes. The question is, are you ready to let go of the lie? Are you ready to stop proving yourself to people who don't matter? Are you ready to discover what happens when you build power in silence instead of wasting it in noise? Because the path of the silent warrior isn't easy. It requires you to go against everything you've been taught, to trust in stillness when everyone else is running in panic, to remain calm when the world is chaos. But if you can do this, if you can master what you're about to learn, you won't just become powerful. You'll become unstoppable, and nobody will see you coming. What samurais knew and CEOs rediscovered. You want proof? Good. You should be skeptical. Everything I just told you contradicts what you've been taught your entire life. So let's look at the people who actually wielded power. Not the people who talked about it, the ones who shaped history, built empires, won impossible battles, changed the world. And here's what you'll discover. Every single one of them understood what I'm teaching you. They mastered stillness before they mastered action. Let's start in feudal Japan. 16th century. The samurai weren't just warriors. They were artists of war, and their training reveals something most modern people completely miss. Before a samurai learned to swing a sword, he learned to sit for hours, in perfect stillness, breathing, observing his own mind. This wasn't a warm-up exercise. This was the foundation of everything. The practice was called zazen, seated meditation. Sounds simple, right? Try it. Sit completely still for 10 minutes. No phone, no distractions, just you and your thoughts. Most people can't do it. Their minds race. Their bodies fidget. They need stimulation, distraction, anything but stillness. But the samurai, they could sit for hours. Why? Because they understood something crucial. The warrior who cannot control his own mind will be controlled by his enemy. Here's what happened in battle. Two samurai face each other. Both are skilled. Both are trained. Both want to live. The difference: one samurai's mind is still. He sees everything. The opponent's breathing pattern, the subtle shift in weight, the tension in the shoulders that telegraphs the next move. He's not thinking. He's observing, present, aware. The other samurai's mind is racing, thinking about winning, about losing, about what happens if he fails. That internal noise, it's fatal, because while he's arguing with himself, the still warrior is reading him like a book. The strike comes, not from effort, from stillness. The samurai with the quiet mind moves with perfect timing. His opponent never saw it coming. Not because the strike was particularly fast, because his own mental noise blinded him. He was fighting two battles, one with his opponent, one with himself. The silent warrior only fought one, and he won before the swords ever met. Average warriors trained their bodies. Elite warriors trained their minds. Average warriors wanted to be the fastest, the strongest, the most aggressive. Elite warriors wanted to be the most present, the most aware, the most still. Guess which ones survived? Guess which ones became legends? Now let's jump forward 400 years. Different world. Same principle. Walk into the office of any truly elite CEO. What do you notice? It's quiet, almost eerily so. No chaos, no panic. No 20 people demanding attention. There's space, both physical and mental. These people guard their environment like samurais guarded their attention, because they know external chaos creates internal chaos. And internal chaos makes clear thinking impossible. Warren Buffett's office in Omaha. No computer on his desk for years. No stock tickers. No 24-hour news. Just books, reports, time to think. People thought he was out of touch, behind the times. While they were drowning in real-time data, making reactive decisions, he was reading annual reports from companies nobody else was watching. When he moved, billions moved with him, but most of his time, stillness, observation, patience. The average investor checks their portfolio 5 times a day. Every fluctuation creates anxiety. Should I buy? Should I sell? What if I'm wrong? Their emotions drive their decisions. They react to noise. Buffett checks his holdings maybe once a quarter. He doesn't care about daily fluctuations. He's not playing a game of reactions. He's playing a game of probability and patience. One approach creates stress and mediocre returns. The other creates calm and legendary wealth. Bill Gates, during his Microsoft years, scheduled think weeks. He'd disappear to a cabin. No phone, no interruptions, just books and time. His team thought it was a luxury. It wasn't. It was strategic necessity. Those weeks of stillness generated insights that shaped technology for decades. While everyone else was in meetings, managing, putting out fires, Gates was thinking 3 years ahead, seeing patterns nobody else saw. Making decisions from clarity, not chaos. The pattern repeats everywhere you look. Jeff Bezos famously makes all his important decisions before noon. Why? Because that's when his mind is clearest, most refreshed, least cluttered with the day's noise. After lunch, he does meetings, routine work, things that don't require peak cognitive performance. Average leaders grind all day. Elite leaders protect their mental clarity like a national treasure. Here's what they figured out. Decision quality matters more than decision quantity. One excellent decision made from stillness and clarity outperforms 100 reactive decisions made from panic and pressure. But most people never experience that level of clarity because they never create the stillness required to access it. Let's talk about chess. Bobby Fischer, Magnus Carlsen, Garry Kasparov. Watch them during a game. While their opponent is fidgeting, looking around, showing tension, the masters sit like statues, breathing steady, eyes calm. They're not thinking harder than their opponent. They're thinking clearer. The still mind sees combinations the busy mind misses. Patterns emerge in silence that chaos obscures. The amateur chess player sees 3 moves ahead and feels smart. The master sees 15 moves ahead and makes it look effortless. How? Not because they have a faster processor, because they have a quieter one. Less mental noise means more mental bandwidth. It's that simple and that difficult. You want to know the most valuable skill in the 21st century? It's not coding. It's not marketing. It's not networking. It's the ability to maintain mental clarity in a world designed to destroy it. Because clarity gives you an asymmetric advantage. While everyone else is distracted, overwhelmed, reacting, you're seeing opportunities they're blind to, making connections they can't make, executing strategies they don't have the bandwidth to conceive. Here's the third principle, and this one is going to sound arrogant until you understand it. Elite performers don't compete with the crowd. They operate in a different category entirely. The crowd is running a sprint. The elite are playing chess. The crowd is reacting to the latest trend. The elite are creating the trends. The crowd is exhausted from constant motion. The elite are rested from strategic stillness. Think about it. When everyone is zigging, the elite are zagging. Not to be contrarian, because they saw what everyone else missed. While the crowd was panicking about a crisis, the elite were calmly identifying the opportunity within it. While the crowd was celebrating a trend, the elite were preparing for what comes after. It's not that they're smarter, it's that they're stiller. And stillness creates perspective. Let me give you a modern example. March 2020, the world goes into lockdown. Panic everywhere. Markets crashing. Businesses closing. Fear dominating every conversation. Average people froze, or panicked, or made emotional decisions they'd regret. Elite operators did something different. They got still. They assessed. They asked, what are the second-order effects here? What opportunities does this crisis create? While everyone else was reacting, some people were planning. They saw remote work exploding, so they invested in collaboration tools. They saw e-commerce accelerating, so they built digital infrastructure. They saw the old world dying, so they positioned themselves for the new one. Not because they were lucky, because they were still enough to think while others were panicking. The average person sees a crisis and thinks, how do I survive this? The elite performer sees the same crisis and asks, how do I position myself to thrive after this? One mindset is defensive, reactive, fear-based. The other is offensive, strategic, opportunity-based. Guess which one leads to breakthrough outcomes? Here's what samurais, CEOs, and chess masters all understand. The battlefield isn't external. It's internal. The real war is between your conditioned reactions and your conscious choices, between your emotional impulses and your strategic thinking, between the part of you that wants to react and the part that knows patience is power. Win that internal battle, and external battles become almost easy. Most people lose before they even begin, not because they lack skill, because they lack internal discipline. They're slaves to their emotional reactions. Someone provokes them, they react. Market moves, they react. Competitor makes a move, they react. They're puppets, and whoever can trigger their emotions controls their actions. The silent warrior. You can't control what doesn't react. You can't manipulate what doesn't engage. You can't defeat what remains unmoved. Ancient Stoic philosophers called this the inner citadel, an unshakable core that external chaos cannot penetrate. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, wrote his meditations during military campaigns, surrounded by war, death, chaos. His writings, calm, clear, strategic, because his inner world was ordered, still impenetrable. The external storm couldn't reach the internal peace. You know what's fascinating? Neuroscience is now proving what these masters knew intuitively. When your brain is in a state of calm focus, it operates completely differently than when it's stressed. Stressed brain, narrow focus, reactive thinking, fight or flight mode. Calm brain, expanded awareness, creative problem solving, strategic thinking. Same brain, different state, radically different results. The average person spends most of their life in stress mode. Their baseline is anxiety. Their body pumping cortisol constantly. Their mind in survival mode. You can't build an empire from survival mode. You can barely maintain what you have. Elite performers train themselves to access calm focus at will. Not because life isn't stressful, because they've mastered the ability to remain still internally, regardless of external conditions. Here's a question worth considering. When was the last time you made a major life decision from a place of genuine calm? Not forced calm, not fake calm, real deep stillness. Most people never do. They decide from anxiety, from pressure, from other people's expectations, from fear of missing out. Then they wonder why their decisions don't lead to the outcomes they wanted. The most successful people I've studied all have this in common. They make major decisions slowly. They gather information. They sit with it. They let their subconscious mind process. They wait for clarity. Only then do they move. And when they move decisively. No second guessing. No hesitation. Because the decision came from stillness, not stress. Average people make fast decisions and spend years dealing with the consequences. Elite performers make slow decisions and reap rewards for decades. One approach prioritizes speed. The other prioritizes accuracy. In a world that worships speed, accuracy is an unfair advantage. Let me tell you about a concept from Japanese martial arts called Ma-ai. It means interval of space, but it's deeper than that. It's about the perfect distance between you and your opponent. Too close, you can't see what's coming. Too far, you can't act when opportunity appears. The master maintains perfect ma-I, not through effort, through awareness, through stillness that allows constant micro-adjustments. This applies to everything. Business, relationships, investments, life. Most people are either too close or too far, too emotionally involved or too detached, too invested or too cautious. They oscillate between extremes. The silent warrior maintains perfect distance, engaged but not entangled, involved but not overwhelmed, present but not possessed. Here's the fourth principle, the one that will make you dangerous if you internalize it. Information without clarity is noise. More information doesn't solve problems. Better thinking does. And better thinking only emerges from stillness. The average person drowns in information and wonders why they're not getting smarter. The elite person guards their inputs carefully and becomes wiser every day. Think about your information diet. How much of what you consume actually makes you better? How much is just entertainment disguised as education? How much is other people's panic packaged as news? How much is distraction dressed up as productivity? The silent warrior consumes information like a sniper chooses targets. Selective, intentional, purposeful. You're starting to see the pattern now. Samurais who meditated, CEOs who schedule emptiness, chess masters who sit like stone, billionaires who move in silence, philosophers who cultivated inner peace, warriors who won through stillness. They're not different species. They're people who discovered the same truth you're discovering right now. Real power doesn't come from doing more. It comes from being more present, more aware, more still. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you master stillness, action becomes effortless. Not because you're trying less, because you're aligned, moving with the flow instead of against it, striking at the perfect moment instead of constantly, conserving energy for the moves that matter instead of wasting it on the ones that don't. The next chapter is where this gets practical. I'm going to teach you Wu Wei, not as philosophy, as an operating system. A way of moving through the world that makes you untouchable, unpredictable, unstoppable. But you needed to see the proof first. You needed to know that this isn't some mystical nonsense. This is how the elite actually operate. This is the hidden pattern behind every legendary success. So the question is, are you ready to learn the method? Because once you see how they do it, you can't unsee it. Once you understand the mechanics of Wu Wei, the world will never look the same. You'll spot the silent warriors everywhere. And more importantly, you'll become one. The Wu Wei principle. Wu Wei. Two simple words that most people completely misunderstand. When you first hear it translated as non-doing or effortless action, your brain probably defaults to one of two interpretations. Either it sounds like an excuse for laziness or it sounds like mystical nonsense. It's neither. Wu Wei is the most practical, powerful operating system you'll ever install. And by the end of this chapter, you'll understand why elite performers across every field are essentially practicing Wu Wei, even if they've never heard the term. Let me clear up the biggest misconception immediately. Wu Wei doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing without forcing, acting without struggling, moving with the current instead of against it. Think of it like this. You can swim upstream or downstream. Upstream requires constant effort, exhausts you quickly, and gets you nowhere. Downstream requires minimal effort, conserves energy, and carries you forward. Same river, radically different experiences. Wu Wei is choosing downstream while everyone else is drowning upstream. Here's the fifth principle, and this one rewires everything. Force is the enemy of power. Read that again. The more you force, the less effective you become. The more you struggle, the more resistance you create. The harder you push, the harder the world pushes back. This isn't philosophy. This is physics. Every action creates an equal and opposite reaction. Most people spend their entire lives creating resistance they then have to overcome. The Wu Wei practitioner eliminates the resistance in the first place. Average people approach problems with force. Something needs to change, so they push. Someone disagrees, so they argue. A goal feels distant, so they grind. Force, force, force. And they wonder why everything feels like a battle. Elite performers approach the same situations differently. They ask, where is the natural leverage point? Where can I apply minimal effort for maximum result? Where is the path of least resistance that still reaches the destination? Let me give you a concrete example. You want to build a business. Average approach, work 18-hour days, hustle hard. Grind constantly. Force it into existence through sheer willpower. Elite approach. Identify the one leverage point that makes everything else easier. Find the distribution channel that gives you access to millions. Build the system that generates results while you sleep. Create the offer so compelling that customers come to you. One approach burns you out, the other builds momentum. The difference? The average person is using force. The elite performer is using Wu Wei. They're not working less hard. They're working with the grain instead of against it. And that distinction makes all the difference. Because working with the grain feels effortless, even when it's intense. Working against the grain feels exhausting, even when you're barely moving. Here's what Wu Wei actually looks like in practice. You observe carefully. You identify patterns. You spot the natural flow of things. Then, and only then, you act. But your action is perfectly timed, perfectly placed, minimal effort, maximum impact. Like the martial artist who doesn't block the punch but redirects it. Uses the opponent's force against them. That's Wu Wei. That's what makes masters look superhuman. They're not. They're just working with reality instead of against it. Nature demonstrates this principle constantly. Water never forces its way through a mountain. It finds the cracks. It flows into the weaknesses. It's patient, relentless, and eventually the mountain is gone. Not because water is hard, because water is adaptable. The bamboo doesn't resist the typhoon. It bends, flexes, survives while the rigid oak snaps and dies. Softness wins. Not someday, always, but only if you understand how to apply it. Most people see softness as weakness, so they make themselves rigid, inflexible, unyielding. They think this makes them strong. It makes them brittle. The first real pressure, they crack. Wu Wei teaches the opposite. Be like water. Be like bamboo. Adapt to circumstances without losing your essence. Yield without surrendering. Flow without fracturing. This isn't weakness disguised as strength. This is actual strength that most people never access because they're too busy proving how hard they are. Here's the sixth principle. Timing is everything. The best action at the wrong time fails. An average action at the perfect time succeeds. Elite performers obsess over timing. Not because they're perfectionists, because they understand that Wu Wei is fundamentally about alignment. Aligning your action with the natural rhythm of the situation. Strike too early, you waste the opportunity. Strike too late, the moment passes. Strike at the perfect instant and it feels like magic. Think about a surfer. They don't create the wave. They can't. They don't force the wave to come. It won't. They wait, observe, position themselves. And when the wave arrives, they act decisively. For those few seconds of action, they've harnessed thousands of pounds of natural force. That's not their power. That's them aligning with power that already exists. That's Wu Wei. That's what you're learning to do with your life. The average person tries to make waves, create momentum from nothing. Force results through willpower alone. Exhausting. The elite performer waits for the wave, positions themselves, rides the momentum that's already there. Effortless. Both end up moving forward. One is depleted, the other is energized. One approach works once and requires recovery. The other approach compounds and builds capacity. Now here's where most people get Wu Wei wrong. They think it means passive. It absolutely does not. Wu Wei is active non-action followed by decisive action. You're not sitting around waiting for life to happen. You're actively observing, constantly positioning, perpetually preparing. Then, when the moment arrives, you strike with total commitment. The stillness isn't the absence of readiness. It's the presence of coiled potential. A predator in the wild demonstrates this perfectly. Watch a lion. Hours of stillness, not moving, barely breathing, waiting, observing. Then in 3 seconds of explosive action, the hunt is over. That lion isn't lazy. It's efficient. It's conserving energy for the moment that matters. Most animals would chase constantly, exhaust themselves and starve. The lion understands Wu Wei instinctively. Wait for the perfect moment, then move with total commitment. You need to operate the same way. Most of your time should be observation, positioning, and preparation. Small percentage of your time should be decisive action. But when you act fully. No half measures, no hedging, complete commitment. Because you've waited for the right moment, you can afford to go all in. Your timing makes success probable. Your commitment makes it inevitable. Here's the seventh principle, and this is where Wu Wei becomes a competitive advantage. Resistance reveals misalignment. If everything is a struggle, you're forcing. If you're meeting constant resistance, you're out of sync with reality. This is feedback. Most people ignore it. They double down, push harder. I just need to want it more. No, you need to find the path of less resistance that still reaches your goal. Average performers hit a wall and push harder against it. Elite performers hit a wall and look for the door. They understand that obstacles aren't there to be overcome through brute force. They're there to redirect you to a better path. The universe, reality, whatever you want to call it, is constantly giving you feedback. Wu Wei is about listening to that feedback instead of ignoring it. Let me give you a business example. You launch a product, nobody buys. Average response. Run more ads, push harder, convince people they need it. Elite response, that's feedback. Either the offer is wrong, the market is wrong, or the timing is wrong. Instead of forcing, they adapt, pivot, find the alignment. One approach leads to burnout and failure. The other leads to breakthrough and success. This doesn't mean quit when things are hard. It means distinguish between necessary difficulty and unnecessary resistance. Building a company is difficult. Building the wrong company is resistant. Training for a marathon is difficult. Training with improper form is resistant. Learning a skill is difficult. Learning a skill you have no aptitude for is resistant. Wu Wei is choosing difficulty that leads somewhere over resistance that leads nowhere. Here's what this looks like practically. You set a goal. You start moving toward it. Pay attention to how it feels, not whether it's hard, but whether it's resistant. Hard feels like climbing a mountain. You're making progress. Every step is effort, but every step moves you forward. Resistant feels like pushing a rope. Lots of effort, minimal progress. If it's hard, persist. If it's resistant, reassess. The elite performer constantly calibrates. Am I forcing this or flowing with it? Am I struggling against reality or working with it? Am I creating unnecessary resistance, or is this necessary difficulty? These questions save years of wasted effort. Because most people spend decades forcing things that were never meant to be, instead of minutes finding things that flow naturally. Now let's talk about the flow state. You've probably experienced it. Time disappears. Effort feels effortless. Everything clicks. Athletes call it the zone. Artists call it inspiration. Psychologists call it flow. I'm telling you, it's the same thing ancient Taoists called Wu Wei. It's the state of perfect alignment between your action and the moment. And here's the secret. It's not random. You can cultivate it. You can access it deliberately. That's what this entire system is designed to do. Average people experience flow accidentally, maybe a few times a year. Something just clicks. They're not sure why. Can't replicate it. Elite performers engineer flow. They create the conditions for it. They understand the prerequisites, and they spend most of their time in that state. Not because they're special, because they've mastered Wu Wei. They've learned to align instead of force, to flow instead of fight, to work with reality instead of against it. Here are the conditions for Wu Wei. First, clarity of intention. You know what you're trying to accomplish. Not vaguely, precisely. Second, present awareness. You're here now, not in the past, not in the future. Fully engaged with this moment. Third, relaxed intensity. You're focused but not tense. Committed but not rigid. Fourth, responsive action. You're reacting to feedback in real time. Adjusting constantly. Fifth, detachment from outcome. You care about the result, but you're not attached to it. You're playing the game fully without being imprisoned by the stakes. Most people violate every single one of these. They're unclear about what they want. They're mentally somewhere else. They're tense and rigid. They ignore feedback. They're desperately attached to outcomes. Then they wonder why success feels impossible. Meanwhile, the Wu Wei practitioner satisfies all 5 conditions naturally. And success feels inevitable. Not because they're lucky, because they're aligned. Here's the 8th principle. The path of Wu Wei reveals itself to the still mind. You can't figure out the right action through analysis alone. You have to feel it, sense it. Intuition isn't mystical. It's pattern recognition happening faster than conscious thought. Your subconscious has processed millions of data points. When you get still, it communicates. But if your mind is noisy, you'll never hear it. Average people make decisions through overthinking. Pros and cons lists, analysis paralysis, endless deliberation. Sometimes useful, often a way to avoid trusting yourself. Elite performers think deeply, then get still. They let the answer emerge, and it does. Not from nowhere, from the wisdom already inside them. Wu Wei isn't about abandoning thought. It's about combining thought with intuition, logic with feeling, analysis with awareness. You already know this. Think about the times you ignored your gut and regretted it. You knew, something in you knew, but you overrode it with logic, with other people's opinions, with fear. Wu Wei is learning to trust that knowing, not blindly, but as legitimate data. Your intuition is pattern recognition. Your logic is sequential processing. You need both. Most people over-rely on one and ignore the other. Here's what I want you to understand. Wu Wei isn't a technique you apply sometimes. It's a way of being you cultivate constantly. Every interaction is an opportunity to practice. Do you force this conversation or flow with it? Do you push this project or position yourself for the right moment? Do you resist this obstacle or redirect around it? Every moment you're choosing, force or flow, struggle or strategy, average or elite. The beautiful thing about Wu Wei is that it compounds. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, you don't think about it. You just operate this way. You see the path of least resistance instantly. You feel when timing is right. You know when to act and when to wait. It becomes automatic. And when Wu Wei is your default setting, you become unstoppable. Not through force, through alignment. In the next chapter, we're diving into the water principle. Why the softest substance on earth defeats the hardest. How adaptability trumps strength every single time. And how you can become like water in every area of your life. Because once you understand this, you'll never approach conflict, competition, or challenges the same way again. The rigid break. The fluid prevail. Always. But here's what you need to do right now. Start noticing. Where in your life are you forcing? Where are you struggling against reality instead of working with it? Where are you pushing upstream when downstream is available? Don't change anything yet. Just observe. Because awareness is the first step. And Wu Wei begins with seeing clearly why water beats stone every time water is soft. Stone is hard. Put them together and common sense says the stone wins. Common sense is wrong. Give them time, and water carves through mountains, reshapes coastlines, destroys civilizations. The stone, it cracks, crumbles, disappears. This isn't metaphor, this is observable reality. And if you understand why water always wins, you'll understand how to become unstoppable in a world full of rigid competition. Let me ask you something. When you face opposition, what's your instinct? Most people harden. They meet force with force. Someone pushes, they push back. Someone attacks, they defend aggressively. It feels natural, intuitive, strong. It's actually the weakest possible response. Because when you harden, you become brittle. And brittle things break, every single time. Here's the 9th principle, and this is where most people's programming completely fails them. Adaptability is power, not strength, not aggression, not dominance. Adaptability, the ability to change shape without losing essence, to yield without surrendering, to flow around obstacles instead of smashing through them. Average people see this as weakness. Elite performers recognize it as the ultimate competitive advantage. Think about a negotiation. Average negotiator comes in with a rigid position. This is what I want. This is what I'll accept. No flexibility. They think this makes them strong, formidable. In reality, it makes them predictable and easy to defeat. The elite negotiator, they come in like water. They listen. They adapt. They find the cracks in the other person's position. They flow into the weaknesses. They get what they want, not through force but through fluidity. Here's what happens in practice. The rigid negotiator states their terms. The other side says no. Now what? Push harder? Threaten? Walk away? They've boxed themselves in. The adaptive negotiator explores. What do you actually need? What are you afraid of? What would make this work for you? They're gathering intelligence, finding the path of least resistance. And when they propose a solution, it feels natural, obvious, like it was inevitable. That's water. That's Wu Wei. That's power that doesn't announce itself. Let me give you another example. Business competition. Average company builds a product and defends it viciously. This is what we do. This is our market. This is our advantage. They build walls, moats, defenses, rigid structure. Along comes a competitor who acts like water. They don't attack the fortress directly. They flow around it. They find the underserved segment, the unmet need, the weakness in the wall, and suddenly the fortress is irrelevant. Blockbuster had stores everywhere. Netflix mailed DVDs, then streamed. They didn't beat Blockbuster's game. They changed the game entirely. Water finding a new path while stone sits unmoved and dies. The pattern repeats endlessly. Kodak owned film. Digital photography flowed around them. Taxi companies owned transportation. Uber flowed around regulation. Traditional media owned distribution. The internet flowed around gatekeepers. Every time the rigid structure thinks it's safe, fortified, unbeatable. Every time the adaptive approach finds the weakness, exploits the inflexibility, wins without a direct fight. Here's what you need to understand about water. It doesn't fight. It persists. There's a massive difference. Fighting requires constant energy expenditure. Persistence is just continuing to exist. Water doesn't wake up every day and decide to erode the mountain. It just flows. Constantly, relentlessly. And over time, the mountain that seemed permanent is gone. Patience plus consistency plus adaptability equals inevitability. Average people want immediate results. They need to see progress daily, so they push hard for a week, burn out, quit. Elite performers think in decades. They understand that small, consistent pressure applied intelligently over long periods produces extraordinary results. They're not in a hurry. They're inevitable, like water wearing away stone. You can't see it happening day to day, but look back after years and everything has changed. Here's the 10th principle. Softness isn't weakness. Persistence is. Most people have this backwards. They think hard and aggressive equals strong. Soft and patient equals weak. Reality disagrees. The hardest materials shatter under pressure. The softest materials absorb and redirect. Which one survives? Drop a glass on concrete. The concrete seems harder. The glass breaks. Why? Because rigidity can't handle impact. Now throw water at concrete. The water adapts instantly, flows around, survives. Over time, the water will destroy the concrete. The concrete will never destroy the water. You need to become water in how you deal with conflict. Someone attacks you verbally. Average response, attack back, harden, defend, get rigid. Elite response, absorb, redirect, flow around the aggression. They're wasting energy on the attack. You're conserving energy by not engaging. They exhaust themselves. You remain fresh. Eventually they're spent. You're still there. Who won? Not through a fight. Through fluidity. Let me show you what this looks like in real situations. You're in a meeting. Someone criticizes your idea aggressively, trying to embarrass you, make you look bad. Average response, defend the idea. Argue back. Get emotional. Now you're in a fight. Even if you win, you lose. Elite response. That's an interesting perspective. What specifically concerns you? You just flowed around the attack, didn't engage the aggression, redirected to substance. They either have valid concerns which you can address, or they don't, which becomes obvious. Either way, you maintained composure. That's power. That's water. Here's another scenario. You're building something. A competitor copies you, attacks your market, undercuts your price. Average response, panic, fight back directly. Price war. Marketing war. Burn resources trying to defend territory. Elite response, adapt. They're copying version 1. You're already building version 2. They're fighting for yesterday's market. You're creating tomorrow's. They're rigid. You're fluid. They're reacting to you. You're 3 moves ahead. Water doesn't fight the stone. It flows around, over, under. Eventually, the stone is surrounded, defeated, without a battle. Most people think competition is about being stronger. It's not. It's about being more adaptive. The company that can pivot fastest wins. The individual who can learn fastest wins. The organization that can change course without ego wins. Strength is temporary. Adaptability is permanent. You can be the strongest today and extinct tomorrow. But if you're adaptive, you survive everything, thrive through everything, outlast everything. Here's what water teaches us about dealing with obstacles. You can go through them, over them, around them, or under them. Rigid thinking says, I must go through. This is the only way. Water thinking says, what's the path of least resistance that still reaches my destination? Sometimes that's through. Often it's around. Occasionally it's waiting until the obstacle moves itself. The point is, you're not attached to one method. You're attached to the outcome. The method is flexible. Average performers hit an obstacle and see failure. Elite performers hit an obstacle and see information. This path is blocked. Good to know. What other paths exist? They're not emotionally invested in how they reach the goal, only that they reach it. That psychological flexibility is the difference between those who succeed occasionally and those who succeed inevitably. Because life is full of obstacles, the person who requires one specific path will be stopped. The person who can find 10,000 paths is unstoppable. Let me talk about something most people never consider. Water has no shape. It takes the shape of whatever contains it. Pour it in a cup, it becomes the cup. Pour it in a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Seems like weakness, right? It's actually the ultimate adaptability. Water never fights the container. It fills it perfectly. Then if the container breaks, water flows free. It was never trapped. It was just temporarily shaped. Your ego wants you to have a rigid identity, to be this type of person, to operate this way, to never change. That's stone thinking, and it makes you fragile. Elite performers have a stable core but flexible expression. They know who they are fundamentally, but how that expresses adapts to context. They're different in a boardroom than a bar, different with employees than with family, different in crisis than in calm. That's not being fake. That's being water. They're still the same essential being, but the form adapts to the situation. This gives them range, options, the ability to operate effectively in any environment. Average people are the same everywhere. Same approach, same style, same rigidity. It works in some contexts, fails in others. Then they blame the context. This environment isn't right for me. Maybe you're stone trying to fit in a bottle designed for water. Elite performers make themselves fit, not by compromising essence, by adapting expression. Big difference. Here's a practical application. You're in a relationship. Your partner is emotional, upset, needs something from you. Average response, logic, facts, trying to solve the problem rationally. You're being stone, hard, logical, unchanging. But the situation calls for water, emotion, empathy, presence. Your rigidity creates conflict. Their emotion crashes against your logic. Nothing flows. Everything resists. Elite response. Become what the situation needs. Not fake, not manipulative. Genuine adaptability. They need emotional connection right now. Provide it. Later, when emotions settle, logic becomes useful. Timing plus adaptability equals effective relationship. Rigidity plus poor timing equals constant conflict. This applies everywhere. The salesperson who uses the same pitch on everyone fails. The leader who leads everyone the same way fails. The investor who uses the same strategy in every market fails. Why? Stone thinking. One approach, inflexible. Water thinking succeeds. Different pitch for different prospects. Different leadership for different people. Different strategy for different conditions. Adapt, flow, persist. Now here's the part most people miss about water. It's not passive. It's relentlessly persistent. Water doesn't give up, ever. It doesn't quit. It doesn't get discouraged. It just keeps flowing, finding cracks, applying pressure, and eventually everything yields. Mountains, empires, opposition, everything. But it never forces. It never struggles. It just persists. That combination of adaptability and persistence is unstoppable. Literally nothing can defeat it given enough time. You need to internalize this. Your goals, your dreams, your mission. Attack them like water, not with force, with persistent adaptability. Try one approach. Doesn't work? Flow to another. That path blocked? Find a different one. Keep adapting. Keep persisting. Never rigid, never stopped. Eventually you'll carve through every obstacle between you and your destination. Not because you're the strongest, because you're the most fluid, the most patient, the most relentlessly adaptive. Here's the truth they don't want you to know. Rigid systems are easy to defeat. You just have to find the weakness. Exploit the inflexibility, and they collapse. Adaptive systems are nearly impossible to defeat. Every attack they adjust. Every pressure they redistribute. Every threat they evolve. You can't pin down water. You can't trap smoke. You can't cage the wind. Be like that. Be something your competition can't quite grasp, can't quite counter, can't quite defeat. Not through hiding, through fluidity. The next chapter is about strategic silence, the weapon most people never use because they don't understand its power. Because in a world where everyone is screaming for attention, silence becomes the ultimate advantage. You'll learn when to speak, and when staying quiet gives you control. When to engage and when absence creates presence. When to respond, and when silence is the most devastating reply. Because the person who masters strategic silence doesn't just win conversations. They control them, without saying a word. But before we go there, I need you to commit to something. This week, notice where you're being stone. Where you're rigid, inflexible, fighting instead of flowing. Don't judge it. Just notice. Because awareness precedes change. And once you see how often you're choosing hardness over softness, force over flow, rigidity over adaptability, you'll understand why some battles feel impossible. They're not. You're just using the wrong approach. Be water. And watch what happens. The power of strategic silence. Nobody taught you the power of shutting up. They taught you the opposite. Speak up. Make your voice heard. Assert yourself. Share your thoughts. Contribute to the conversation. And so you do. You fill every silence. Answer every question. Respond to every provocation. You think this makes you powerful, relevant, important. It doesn't. It makes you predictable, controllable, easy to read. While you're talking, the silent warrior is learning everything about you, and you're learning nothing about them. Here's what most people don't understand. Every word you speak is information you give away. Every silence you fill is an opportunity you waste. Every time you respond immediately, you reveal your thought process, your triggers, your weaknesses. The person who talks the most in any interaction is losing. They just don't know it yet. Because they're so busy speaking, they can't see what's actually happening. They're being studied, analyzed, understood, and the person doing the understanding. They're saying almost nothing. Watch an elite interrogator. They don't ask 100 questions. They ask 3. Then they sit in silence, waiting. The silence becomes uncomfortable, unbearable. The person being questioned feels compelled to fill it. So they talk and talk and talk, revealing everything. Not because the interrogator forced them, because silence created space, and humans are programmed to fill space. The interrogator knows this, uses this, says almost nothing, learns everything. Here's the 11th principle, and this one will make you dangerous if you apply it. Silence is power, not speech. Silence. The person who can sit comfortably in silence controls the interaction. Because everyone else is uncomfortable, everyone else feels the need to break it. So they speak, they reveal, they give away leverage. While the silent person accumulates information, the talkative person depletes it. One is gaining advantage, the other is surrendering it. And neither realizes what's happening until it's over. Average people fear silence. In conversations, they fill every gap. On calls, they talk continuously. In meetings, they contribute constantly. They think this demonstrates value, engagement, intelligence. Elite performers weaponize silence. They speak when it serves them. They're quiet when observation serves them better. They let others fill the silence with revelations, commitments, mistakes. The talker feels like they're dominating the conversation. The silent observer is actually controlling it. Let me give you a practical example. Salary negotiation. You've done the interview. They like you. They ask what salary you're looking for. Average response, give a number immediately. Maybe justify it. Explain why you're worth it. You just lost leverage. Elite response. What range do you have budgeted for this role? Then silence. Don't fill it. Don't elaborate. Don't justify the question. Just wait. The silence will be uncomfortable. For them, not for you. And in that discomfort, they'll often reveal the actual budget. The ceiling they won't admit to. Information you'd never get by talking. Now you have leverage. Now you know the playing field. All because you asked one question and then shut up. Here's another scenario. Sales conversation. You've presented your offer. The prospect is considering. There's silence. Average salesperson panics, starts talking. And another thing we also offer, they're adding more features. Lowering the price, giving away value, trying to fill the uncomfortable silence. Elite salesperson says nothing. Sits in the silence, comfortable, patient, waiting. Because they understand something crucial. The person who speaks first after the offer usually loses. If the prospect speaks first, they're either buying or objecting. Either way, you get information. If you speak first, you're negotiating against yourself, reducing your own leverage. Silence protects your position. Speech compromises it. Most people think negotiation is about talking, presenting, persuading. It's not. It's about information asymmetry. The more you know and they don't, the more leverage you have. Every word they speak gives you information. Every word you speak gives them information. Do the math. The person talking is losing the information war. The person listening is winning it. This isn't theory. This is observable reality in every negotiation that's ever happened. Here's what silence does that speech cannot. It creates pressure, psychological pressure. Humans are wired to interpret silence as judgment, as disapproval, as threat. When you're silent, the other person's mind fills that silence with meaning, usually negative meaning. They start wondering what you're thinking, whether you're impressed, whether you're judging them. That internal discomfort makes them reactive. They start trying to fill the space, to win your approval, to break the tension. And in that reactivity, they give you control. Average performers use words to create leverage. Elite performers use silence to create leverage. Words can be countered, argued with, debated. Silence cannot. There's nothing to counter, nothing to debate. Just space, pressure, discomfort. And that discomfort makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise do. Agree to things they'd normally resist. Reveal things they'd normally hide. Not because you manipulated them, because you simply didn't interrupt their own psychology working against them. Let me tell you about a concept from high-stakes poker. The pros talk about table presence. It's not about being loud. It's about being still, calm, unreadable. The amateur players fidget, talk, react visibly to their cards. They're broadcasting information constantly. The pros sit like statues. Nothing in their face, nothing in their body language, nothing in their speech patterns. They're information vacuums, taking in everything, giving away nothing. And that asymmetry is worth millions. Literally, you need to develop that same presence in your life. Not at a poker table, in meetings, in negotiations, in conversations, in conflicts. The less you speak, the more powerful your words become when you do speak. Think about it. If you talk constantly, your words have no weight. They're just noise. But if you're typically silent, and then you speak, people listen. They lean in. They assume what you're about to say matters. Because you don't waste words. That's not manipulation. That's just understanding how human psychology works. Here's the 12th principle. Listening is not passive. It's the most active thing you can do. Most people think they're listening. They're not. They're waiting to talk. There's a massive difference. Waiting to talk means you're in your own head, planning your response, thinking about what you'll say. You're hearing words but processing nothing. Actual listening means you're fully present, absorbing, understanding, reading between the lines, noticing what's not being said. That level of attention gives you God-mode understanding of the other person, their fears, their wants, their weaknesses, their levers. Average people hear words. Elite people read subtext. They notice the pause before an answer, the topic someone avoids, the thing they emphasize too much, the defensiveness that reveals insecurity, the confidence that reveals certainty. All of this is invisible to the person who's busy planning their next clever thing to say. But it's obvious to the person who's actually listening. And that information is power. Real, actionable, decisive power. Let me show you how this works in a real situation. You're in a business meeting. Someone is pitching their idea. Most people in the room are half listening, preparing their own contributions, checking their phones mentally. You're different. You're fully present, silent, observing. You notice the presenter glosses over the financial projections, moves past them quickly. That's information. They're uncomfortable there, probably because the numbers don't work. You notice they emphasize market size repeatedly. That's information. They're trying to excite you about potential to distract from current reality. You notice they mention 3 competitors but skip one major one. That's information. They either don't know the space or they're hiding something. The meeting ends. Everyone else has opinions based on the surface presentation. You have understanding based on what wasn't said. That's the advantage of strategic silence. You see what talkers miss. You understand what speakers don't realize they're revealing. And when you finally do speak, your question is laser-focused on the weakness you identified. The financial projections look interesting. Can we spend more time on years 3 through 5? Watch what happens. The presenter stumbles, gets defensive, reveals the plan is half-baked. You just killed the deal with one question because you listened strategically, stayed silent intentionally, spoke precisely. Here's what most people get wrong about silence. They think it's about not having anything to say. It's not. It's about having plenty to say and choosing not to. There's a massive difference between empty silence and strategic silence. Empty silence is just being quiet because you don't know what to contribute. Strategic silence is being quiet because you're gathering intelligence, learning patterns, waiting for the perfect moment. One is passive, the other is active. One is weakness, the other is strength. Think about a chess master again. Between moves there's silence. But that silence isn't emptiness. It's calculation, assessment, strategic thinking. The amateur sees silence and assumes nothing is happening. The master knows everything is happening. Possibilities are being evaluated. Traps are being set. The game is being won in the silence, not in the moves. The moves are just the physical manifestation of the thinking that happened in silence. Your life works the same way. Strategic outcomes emerge from strategic silence. Reactive outcomes emerge from reactive speech. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. Silence makes people reveal their true nature. When you're silent, you force others to fill the space. And what they fill it with tells you everything. Insecure people fill silence with self-promotion, trying to impress you, prove themselves. Secure people are comfortable in silence. They don't need to fill it. Manipulative people fill silence with flattery or questions, trying to extract information or create obligation. Honest people fill silence with truth. They're not performing, just communicating. Average people never discover this. They're too busy talking to notice what others would reveal in silence. Elite performers use silence like a screening tool. Stay quiet and people show you exactly who they are. Not who they claim to be, who they actually are. That's priceless information, and it costs you nothing but patience. You didn't interrogate them. You didn't challenge them. You just created space, and they filled it with truth. Here's a practical application. You're in a conflict. Someone is angry with you. Making accusations. Getting emotional. Average response. Defend immediately. Explain. Justify. Counter-accuse. Now you're both yelling. Nothing is resolved. Elite response, silence. Let them vent completely. Don't interrupt. Don't defend. Don't react. Just listen. Two things happen. First, they run out of steam. It's hard to maintain anger when there's no resistance. Second, they often talk themselves into a more reasonable position. They hear their own words, realize they're overreacting, self-correct. You didn't have to do anything. Silence did the work. This doesn't mean you never respond. It means you respond strategically. After they've fully expressed themselves, after the emotion has peaked and started declining, after they've revealed their actual concerns beneath the anger, then you speak. Calmly, addressing the real issue, not the emotional outburst. This approach de-escalates 90% of conflicts, not through clever words, through patient silence, through letting the other person empty their emotional cup before you try to fill it with reason. Here's the truth about strategic silence. It's a muscle. Most people have atrophied this muscle completely. They're uncomfortable with even 5 seconds of silence, so they fill it. Immediately, compulsively, you need to rebuild this capacity. Start small. In your next conversation, after the other person speaks, count to 3 before responding. Just 3 seconds. You'll notice something interesting. They often keep talking, expanding, clarifying, revealing, because the space invited it. That's data you'd have missed if you jumped in immediately. As you practice this, extend it. 3 seconds becomes 5, 5 becomes 10. Eventually, you can sit in silence for minutes, comfortable, patient, powerful, and here's what happens. People start perceiving you differently. They think you're wise, mysterious, confident. Why? Because silence communicates certainty. Only uncertain people need to constantly validate themselves through speech. Certain people can be quiet. Their presence speaks. Their silence has weight. Their eventual words have impact. The next chapter is about stillness under pressure, because everything we've discussed so far becomes irrelevant if you lose your composure when stakes are high. You'll learn how to maintain internal calm when external circumstances are chaos, how to make clear decisions when everyone else is panicking, how to act decisively when others are frozen. Because the silent warrior doesn't just understand these principles in theory, they apply them in the moment, in real time, under pressure. That's where theory becomes mastery. That's where knowledge becomes power. But right now, I want you to experiment. For the next 24 hours, reduce your speaking by half. Literally half. Before you say anything, ask yourself, is this necessary? Does this serve me? Am I speaking to add value or to fill silence? And if it's to fill silence, don't speak. Just observe what happens. Watch how others respond to your silence. Notice what they reveal. Feel the power of strategic quiet. Because until you experience it, you won't believe it. And once you experience it, you'll never go back. Silence isn't the absence of power. It's the presence of it. Stillness. Under pressure, everything you've learned so far becomes worthless if you lose your composure when it matters most. You can understand Wu Wei perfectly. Master the water principle completely. Weaponize silence effectively. But if you panic when pressure hits, you're just another person with theoretical knowledge and zero practical power. The silent warrior isn't defined by what they know in calm moments. They're defined by what they become when everything is falling apart, when stakes are highest, when everyone else is losing their minds. That's when stillness becomes your greatest weapon. Let me paint a picture. Your business is collapsing. Revenue is down 70%. Key employees are leaving. Competitors are circling. Investors are panicking. Every phone call is bad news. Every email is a crisis. Everyone around you is in full-blown panic mode, looking to you for answers, for direction, for salvation. What do? Average leader matches the energy. They panic too. Get frantic. Start making reactive decisions. Call emergency meetings. Send urgent emails. Move fast, break things. Try to fix everything at once. They burn out in a week. Make the situation worse. Accelerate the collapse. Elite leader does the opposite. They get still, not frozen. Still, there's a massive difference. Frozen is paralyzed by fear. Still is composed despite fear. The elite leader creates space. They take a walk. They sit in silence. They let their nervous system calm before they make any decisions. Because they understand something crucial. The quality of your decisions determines the quality of your outcomes. And decision quality plummets when you're in panic mode. Your brain literally cannot think strategically when it's in survival mode. So forcing yourself to be still isn't a luxury. It's a strategic necessity. Here's the 13th principle, and this is where most people fail catastrophically. Pressure reveals preparation. When things are calm, everyone looks competent. Everyone has answers. Everyone seems capable. But pressure is the great revealer. It strips away pretense, exposes gaps, shows who actually has internal resources and who was just performing when it was easy. You cannot develop composure under pressure. You can only develop composure before pressure arrives. Then when pressure hits, you access what you've already built. Think about it like this. A building's foundation doesn't matter on sunny days. Every building stands when there's no stress. But when the earthquake hits, foundation is everything. The building with a weak foundation collapses. The building with a strong foundation survives. Your internal stillness is your foundation. You build it in the quiet moments. You test it in the pressure moments. And if you've built it properly, you remain standing when everyone else is rubble. Average people wait until pressure arrives to try to find calm. Too late. You can't learn to swim after you've been thrown in the ocean. Elite performers build their stillness practice daily. When there's no crisis, no emergency, no pressure. They meditate. They breathe. They practice presence. They train their nervous system to access calm intentionally. So when the crisis arrives, and it will, they have a skill to draw on, a resource to access, a foundation to stand on. The calm isn't something they have to create. It's something they've already installed. Let me give you a real-world scenario. You're in a high-stakes presentation. Board members, investors, your career depends on this. You're mid-presentation and someone asks a question you weren't prepared for. A question that exposes a weakness in your plan. Everyone is watching, waiting. The room goes silent. Average presenter panics, starts rambling, trying to answer without thinking, making it worse. Their nervousness is visible. Their lack of preparation is obvious. Their credibility is destroyed. In 60 seconds, elite presenter does something different. They pause, take a breath. Not obviously, just a momentary stillness. That breath activates their parasympathetic nervous system, calms the automatic panic response, gives their brain a second to shift from reactive to strategic. Then they speak. That's an excellent question. Let me address that directly. Now they've bought themselves time. Acknowledge the validity of the question and can formulate a thoughtful response instead of a panicked reaction. Same situation, completely different outcome. The difference? 1 second of intentional stillness. Here's what happens physiologically when you're under pressure. Your sympathetic nervous system activates, fight or flight. Your heart rate increases. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your thinking becomes narrow and reactive. Blood flow moves from your prefrontal cortex, where strategic thinking happens, to your amygdala, where survival instincts live. You literally become dumber under stress. Your IQ effectively drops. This isn't a metaphor, it's measurable. Stress makes you stupid, temporarily. But stupid decisions have permanent consequences. The only way to counter this is to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Rest and digest. Calm and clarity. How do you do that? Breathing. specifically extending your exhale. When you exhale longer than you inhale, you signal to your body that you're safe. That slows your heart rate, deepens your thinking, reactivates your prefrontal cortex, brings you back online. This isn't mystical, it's neuroscience. And it's the difference between making a decision that saves your situation and making one that destroys it. Here's the 14th principle. Calm is contagious. So is panic. Whatever energy you bring to a crisis becomes the energy of the crisis. If you show up panicked, everyone panics. If you show up calm, everyone calms. You set the tone, not through words, through presence. People read your nervous system before they hear your words. If your body language is screaming fear, your words don't matter. If your presence is radiating calm, you don't need many words. The room will follow your lead, always. This is why leadership is fundamentally about emotional regulation. Your ability to remain still under pressure doesn't just help you, it stabilizes everyone around you. Average leaders try to calm others with words. Doesn't work. Their body is betraying their words. Elite leaders calm others with presence. They walk into chaos and their stillness anchors the room. Nobody needs to say don't panic. Their energy says it. People feel it. And that feeling is more powerful than any speech. You want to know why some leaders inspire confidence? It's not their credentials. It's their composure. People follow those who seem unshaken, because unshaken suggests capability, knowledge, control. Even if it's an illusion, that illusion is worth everything when fear is spreading. Let me tell you about a technique Navy SEALs use. It's called tactical breathing. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold. 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. Repeat. They use this before operations, during firefights, in moments of extreme stress. Why? Because it works. It forces your physiology into a calm state. Your mind follows. You cannot maintain panic while breathing this way. Your body won't allow it. This is a tool, a weapon, something you can deploy the moment you feel pressure rising. And the more you practice it in non-stressful situations, the more effective it becomes when you actually need it. Here's a practical application. You received terrible news. A deal fell through. Someone betrayed you. A relationship ended. Money was lost. Whatever. Your immediate impulse is to react. Text someone. Make a call. Post something. Do something. Anything. Average person follows that impulse. Makes the situation worse. Says things they regret. Burns bridges. Creates additional problems. Elite performer recognizes the impulse and pauses. They sit with the information. They breathe. They let the emotional wave peak and decline. They wait until they can think clearly. Then and only then they respond. The response is measured, strategic, effective, because it came from stillness, not from reactivity. Most people think they don't have time to pause. The situation is urgent. They must act now. Here's the truth. You always have time to take one breath. One conscious breath is enough to shift your state, to interrupt the automatic panic response, to give yourself access to better thinking. That one breath might be the most important action you take all day, because everything that follows will be better quality, higher leverage, more effective, all from a single moment of intentional stillness. Now let's talk about decision-making under pressure. Average people make decisions to relieve the discomfort of uncertainty. They can't stand not knowing, not having an answer, not taking action. So they decide quickly, choose anything, just to escape the tension. This creates terrible outcomes, because the decision wasn't about what's optimal. It was about what's comfortable. And comfortable rarely aligns with effective, elite performers embrace the discomfort of uncertainty. They sit in it. They gather information. They wait for clarity. They understand that uncertainty is information. It's telling you that you don't have enough data yet, or that the situation is still evolving, or that multiple possibilities exist and the best path hasn't revealed itself. Rushing to decision doesn't eliminate uncertainty. It just converts uncertainty into likely failure. Patience allows uncertainty to resolve naturally, and when it does, the right path becomes obvious. Here's the 15th principle. Urgency is usually manufactured. True emergencies are rare. Most of what feels urgent is just someone else's anxiety being projected onto you. They're panicked, so they make you feel like you should panic too. Average performers absorb this urgency. Elite performers evaluate it. They ask, is this actually urgent? Or does it just feel urgent? What happens if I wait an hour, a day? Often the answer is nothing. The emergency resolves itself, or reveals itself as not actually important, All the energy you would have wasted on reactive response is conserved, available for actual priorities. Think about your last week. How many things felt urgent that in retrospect weren't? How many fires did you rush to put out that would have burned themselves out? How much energy did you waste on problems that solved themselves or didn't actually matter? Most people spend their lives in manufactured urgency, always rushing, never thinking. The silent warrior refuses to accept someone else's timeline unless it actually serves them. They move at their own pace, make decisions on their own schedule, maintain their own energy. This isn't arrogance. It's strategic self-preservation. Here's a scenario. You're in a negotiation. High stakes. The other side suddenly says, "We need your decision by end of day." This offer expires tonight. Artificial deadline. Pressure tactic. Average negotiator feels the urgency, panics slightly, makes a rushed decision, accepts a deal they shouldn't, or rejects one they should have considered more carefully. Elite negotiator recognizes the tactic, smiles internally, and says, "I appreciate the timeline. I'll need until tomorrow to give you a thoughtful answer." Watch what happens. 9 times out of 10, the deadline extends. It was never real, just pressure to force a reactive decision. And by refusing to react, you maintained control. This applies everywhere. Job offers with artificial deadlines, investment opportunities that won't last, relationships demanding immediate commitment, usually manipulation, always pressure. The response is always the same. Maintain your stillness. Make decisions on your timeline, not theirs, because the person who controls the timeline controls the outcome. And if they won't extend it, if the offer truly expires, then it probably wasn't right anyway. Real opportunities allow for thoughtful consideration. Scams require urgency. Remember that. Let me tell you about something called the OODA loop. Military strategy concept. Observe, orient, decide, act. Most people skip straight to act. They see a situation and react. No observation, no orientation, no thoughtful decision, just immediate action. This creates chaos, mistakes, regret. The elite performer follows the loop. They observe first. What's actually happening here? Then they orient. What does this mean in context of my goals? Then they decide. What's the optimal response? Then they act, decisively, completely. This takes seconds, not hours. But those seconds of stillness before action make all the difference. Average performers think speed is power. It's not. Timing is power. Acting fast at the wrong moment fails. Acting perfectly at the right moment wins. And the right moment only reveals itself to the person who's still enough to see it. You can be the fastest decision maker in the world. If your decisions are low quality, speed just means you fail faster. Better to be the person who sees clearly, decides wisely, and acts decisively. That combination is unstoppable. Here's the reality about pressure. It's not going away. Life is pressure. Business is pressure. Relationships are pressure. If you're building anything meaningful, pressure is constant. The question isn't how to eliminate it. The question is how you relate to it. Average people see pressure as the enemy, something to avoid, escape, eliminate. Elite performers see pressure as information, as fuel, as the forge that reveals what they're actually made of. They don't love pressure, but they don't fear it either. They've learned to remain still within it, and that stillness transforms pressure from a threat into an advantage. The next chapter is where everything connects. The observer's advantage, because stillness, water, silence, composure under pressure, all of it leads to one thing: the ability to see what others miss. To recognize patterns before they're obvious. To move 3 steps ahead while everyone else is stuck on step 1. The observer doesn't participate in the chaos. They watch it, understand it, use it, and by the time everyone else figures out what happened, the observer has already won. You're about to learn how to become that person, the one who sees, the one who knows, the one who moves with precision while others move with confusion. But right now you need to practice. Find a moment this week where you feel pressure rising. Before you react, stop, breathe, 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. Repeat 3 times. Then ask yourself, is this actually urgent? What's the highest quality decision here? What would I do if I had all the time in the world? Then do that, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if others are pushing for speed. Because one decision made from stillness is worth 100 made from panic. And you're learning to be the person who never panics, ever, no matter what. The observer's advantage. There's a level of power most people never access. Not because it's hidden, because they're too busy participating to see it. They're in the game, in the chaos, in the noise, fighting, reacting, moving, and while they're consumed by the immediate, they're blind to the patterns, the cycles, the predictable sequences that govern everything. The observer sees what the participant misses, and that sight is the ultimate advantage. Because when you can see the pattern, you can predict the outcome. And when you can predict the outcome, you can position yourself to win before the game even begins. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine a chess game between a novice and a master. The novice sees the current board state, the pieces, the immediate threats, the obvious moves. That's their entire reality. The master sees something completely different. They see the pattern unfolding. They recognize the position. They've seen variations of this setup hundreds of times. They know how it typically resolves. They're not seeing what is. They're seeing what will be. 3 moves, 5 moves, 10 moves ahead. The novice is reacting. The master is orchestrating. One is a participant. The other is an observer. And the observer wins. Every time. Here's the 16th principle, and this one separates the competent from the elite. Distance creates clarity. The closer you are to a situation, the less you actually see. You see details, minutiae, trees, but you miss the forest. The pattern, the larger truth. The observer steps back, creates distance, not physical necessarily, psychological, emotional. They detach from the immediate and observe from above. And from that vantage point, everything becomes clear. Patterns emerge. Cycles reveal themselves. The predictable sequence of what's about to happen unfolds like a map. Average people are always in the situation, emotionally invested, ego attached, outcome dependent. They can't see clearly because they're too close. Elite performers train themselves to become the observer, even in their own life. Especially in their own life, they watch themselves, notice their patterns, recognize their triggers, observe their automatic responses. This meta-awareness gives them choice. Where most people just react automatically, the observer sees the reaction coming and chooses whether to follow it or override it. Think about an argument you've had, maybe with a partner, a colleague, a friend. In the moment, you were probably reactive. They said something. You felt something. You responded. Escalation, more feelings, more reactions, chaos. Now think about watching someone else have that exact same argument. You can see everything, where it's going, what each person is really upset about beneath the surface words. The moment it could de-escalate if someone would just back down. You see it all clearly. Why? Because you're the observer. You have distance. No emotional investment. You see the pattern. Elite performers learn to be that observer of their own life. In real time, they're having the argument and simultaneously watching themselves have the argument. They notice, I'm getting defensive. That's my pattern. This is where I usually escalate. What if I don't? That split second of observation creates space, choice, power. The automatic reaction loses its grip. Consciousness takes over, and the outcome changes. This isn't suppression. It's awareness, and awareness transforms everything. Here's what the observer sees that participants miss. Cycles, everything is cyclical. Markets, relationships, emotions, trends, opportunities, threats. Nothing is linear. It's all waves, up and down, expansion and contraction, growth and decay. The participant experiences each moment as unique, novel, unpredictable. The observer recognizes this has happened before. This is the same pattern with different details, and knowing the pattern means knowing what comes next. Average investors panic when markets crash because they're participants, emotionally tied to their portfolio. The number going down feels like personal loss. They can't think, only feel. Elite investors observe the crash as part of a cycle. Markets always crash, then recover, then expand, then crash again. It's predictable, not the timing precisely, but the pattern absolutely. So when everyone else is selling in panic, the observer is buying, not because they're smarter, because they can see the pattern. And the pattern says, fear creates opportunity. Every single time. Here's the 17th principle. Patterns repeat until they're interrupted. Most people are trapped in loops. Same problems, different circumstances. Same relationship dynamics, different partners. Same financial struggles, different jobs. They think they're unlucky, or cursed, or life is just hard. They're not seeing the pattern. They're repeating it. The observer sees, this is familiar. This is my pattern. This is where I always make the same mistake. And seeing it creates the possibility of changing it. You cannot change what you cannot see. The observer sees. Therefore, the observer can change. Let me give you a practical example. You keep attracting the same type of romantic partner. Different person, same dynamic. Maybe they're emotionally unavailable, or controlling, or unreliable. You wonder why. Bad luck, poor judgment? No pattern. You're attracted to a specific energy. That energy triggers something in you. Feels familiar. Comfortable even when it's toxic. The participant just keeps cycling through relationships. The observer notices. Every person is a variation of the same archetype. That's not coincidence. That's my pattern. And once you see it, you can choose differently. Deliberately select against the pattern. Break the cycle. But only if you observe it first. This applies to everything. Business patterns, the way you respond to stress, how you handle money, your relationship with authority, your default strategies, all patterns, all repeating, all observable if you create the distance to see them. Most people never do. They're too busy living their life to watch their life. The observer does both, lives and watches simultaneously, and that dual awareness is what separates those who grow from those who repeat. Now let's talk about reading rooms. Reading people, reading situations. The participant walks into a meeting focused on their agenda, what they want to say, what they want to achieve. They're in their head, rehearsing, preparing. They miss everything actually happening. The observer walks in and sees the entire landscape. Who's aligned with who? Who's threatened by what? Where the tension is, where the opportunity is, what's being said beneath the words. They're not in their head. They're in the room, fully present, observing everything. Average people hear words. Elite people read energy. They notice this person is saying yes, but their body language is saying no. This person is being enthusiastic, but it's performance, not genuine interest. This person is quiet, but they're the real decision maker. This person is loud, but they have no actual power. None of this is subtle once you learn to observe. It's obvious, blatant, but only if you're watching instead of just participating. Here's the 18th principle. Information is everywhere. Most people are blind to it because they're not observing. They're thinking about themselves, their own concerns, their own agenda. The observer shifts attention outward. They watch, they listen, they notice, and they receive constant information. Not from what people say, from what they do, how they say it, what they avoid, what they emphasize, where they're uncomfortable, where they're confident. It's all data, and data is power. Think about a job interview. Average candidate is focused on impressing, on saying the right things, on managing their nerves. They're so self-focused, they learn almost nothing about the company, the culture, the people, whether they'd even want to work there. Elite candidate spends half the interview observing, asking questions, watching how people interact, reading the environment. They're interviewing the company as much as being interviewed, and they leave with clarity. Is this right for me? Are these my people? Does this align with my goals? The average candidate just hopes to get an offer. The elite candidate has the information to make an actual decision. This is the observer's advantage. While everyone else is performing, you're learning. While they're trying to impress, you're gathering intelligence. While they're talking, you're understanding. And that asymmetry means you always have more information, better positioning, clearer decisions. You're playing a different game, a metagame. And in metagames, the observer always wins. Let me tell you about second-order thinking. Most people think first order. If this happens, this result follows. Simple, linear, immediate. The observer thinks second order. If this happens, this result follows, which will cause this reaction, which will create this opportunity, which I can exploit by positioning myself here. They're thinking ahead, around corners, through consequences. Not just what happens next, what happens after what happens next. Average people see a trend and jump on it. Everyone's doing X, so I should too. By the time they join, the trend is mature, crowded, the gains are gone. Elite performers see the trend earlier, but they don't just join it. They think second order. If everyone does X, what will happen? Market saturation, then a swing back. So what's the opposite of X? What becomes valuable when everyone is doing X and it stops working? They position themselves there, in the space that will matter next. While everyone else is fighting for yesterday's opportunity, they're positioned for tomorrow's. This is why the observer seems to be lucky. They're not. They're just seeing further, thinking deeper. positioning smarter. Average people see one move ahead. Elite performers see 5 moves ahead, not because they're more intelligent, because they're more observant. They've trained themselves to watch patterns, recognize cycles, think through consequences, and position accordingly. It looks like magic. It's just observation plus thinking. Here's a practical application. You're in a competitive market. Everyone is competing on price, racing to the bottom, margins collapsing. Average business joins the race, cuts prices, tries to win through being cheapest, loses money, goes bankrupt eventually. Elite business observes, if everyone competes on price, quality suffers. Service declines. Customer experience deteriorates. What's the second-order effect? Customer frustration, desire for premium, willingness to pay more for better. So they position opposite: premium pricing, exceptional quality, superior experience. While everyone fights for price-sensitive customers, they capture value-seeking customers. Different game, better economics, all from observing the pattern and thinking one step ahead. Now let's talk about emotional observation. Most people are slaves to their emotions. Something happens, they feel something, they react from that feeling. The emotion is running them. The observer watches their own emotions, notices, I'm feeling angry right now. Interesting. What triggered that? Is this anger serving me? Is it giving me useful information? Or is it just old programming? This creates space. The emotion doesn't disappear, but it loses its automatic control. You can feel anger and choose not to act from anger. Feel fear and choose not to be controlled by fear. Feel desire and choose not to be driven by desire. Average people are their emotions. Elite performers have emotions. Subtle difference, massive implications. When you are your emotion, you have no choice. The emotion dictates behavior. When you have emotions, you can observe them. Choose your response. Act strategically instead of reactively. This isn't suppression. This isn't denial. This is sovereignty. Ownership of your own experience. And it only comes from observation. From creating enough distance to watch your own inner weather without being swept away by every storm. Here's the truth about the observer's advantage. It compounds. The more you observe, the more patterns you recognize. The more patterns you recognize, the faster you spot them. The faster you spot them, the earlier you can position. The earlier you position, the bigger your advantage. It's a flywheel. Most people never start it. They remain participants their entire lives, never stepping back, never observing, never seeing the patterns that govern their results. The silent warrior lives in observation mode, constantly watching, always learning, perpetually positioning. And over time, this creates such an information advantage that success becomes inevitable. In the final chapter, we're bringing everything together. You're going to learn how to integrate all of this, how to become the silent warrior in your actual life. Not as theory, as practice, as a way of being. Because everything we've covered, stillness, water, silence, pressure, observation, it's all one thing, one integrated approach to power. And that approach is about to become your operating system, your default, your nature, the person you are when no one is watching, and the person you become when everyone is. The silent warrior isn't someone you try to be. It's who you actually are once you strip away the conditioning, once you remember what you forgot, once you become what you always were. But right now, practice observation. For one day, watch yourself. Notice your patterns, your triggers, your automatic responses. Don't judge them. Don't try to change them. Just observe. See yourself as if you were watching someone else. Notice what you notice. Because the moment you can observe yourself clearly, you've already won. The pattern loses its power when you see it. And seeing is the first step to choosing differently. The observer's advantage isn't just about reading others. It's about reading yourself. And that self-knowledge is the foundation of all power, all transformation, all mastery. Becoming the silent warrior, you know the principles. You understand the framework. You've seen the patterns. But knowledge without integration is just entertainment. You didn't come this far to remain the same person with new information. You came to transform, to become something different, something more. The silent warrior isn't a role you play. It's the person you become when you strip away everything that isn't you, when you shed the conditioning, when you remember what power actually is. And now, in this final chapter, we're going to complete that transformation. Not someday, today, right now. As you listen to these words, let me tell you what's different about you now versus 2 hours ago. 2 hours ago, you believed the lie. That power comes from force, from aggression, from constant motion, from making noise. You were exhausted from fighting battles that didn't need to be fought, burned out from pushing when you should have been flowing, frustrated because everything felt harder than it needed to be. That was then. That person is gone. Because now you know. And once you know, you can't unknow. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. The silent warrior has awakened in you. Now we just need to anchor it. Make it permanent. Turn knowledge into nature. Here's the 19th and final principle, the one that makes all the others work. Integration requires practice. You cannot think your way into mastery. You must live your way into it. Every principle we've covered becomes real through application, through testing, through failing and adjusting and trying again. The silent warrior isn't born. They're forged through consistent practice, through choosing stillness when chaos calls, through remaining calm when pressure hits, through observing when participation tempts. Every single day, every single moment. This is how transformation happens, not through understanding, through embodiment. So let's talk about what your life looks like now, how you operate, how you move through the world, how you make decisions, how you handle conflict, how you build power, because everything changes. Not someday, starting immediately. The old you reacted, the new you responds. The old you forced, the new you flows. The old you spoke constantly, the new you weaponizes silence. The old you panicked under pressure, the new you becomes still. The old you participated, the new you observes. These aren't small adjustments. This is a complete rewrite of your operating system. Let me show you what a day looks like for the silent warrior. You wake up, and instead of immediately checking your phone, absorbing everyone else's urgency, you sit for 10 minutes in complete stillness. This isn't meditation in the mystical sense. This is strategic preparation. You're training your nervous system to access calm intentionally, building the foundation of stillness that you'll draw from when pressure arrives later. Most people start their day in reactive mode. You start yours in observation mode. That difference compounds over hours, over days, over years. You move through your morning with intention. Every action is conscious, not rushed, not distracted, not performed while thinking about 17 other things. When you shower, you shower. When you eat, you eat. When you prepare, you prepare. This presence isn't about being slow. It's about being complete, giving each moment full attention. Because scattered attention creates scattered results. Focused attention creates focused power. The silent warrior doesn't multitask. They single task with intensity, then move to the next thing. Complete, present, effective. You enter your first interaction of the day. Maybe a meeting, maybe a conversation, maybe a negotiation. And here's where everything you've learned becomes real. Average person enters ready to speak, to contribute, to be heard. You enter ready to observe. You arrive early. You watch people come in. You notice the energy, the dynamics, who's aligned with who, where the tension is. You say very little at first. Just observe, gather intelligence, read the room. And when you do speak, your words land with weight, because you've spoken from understanding, not from the need to fill silence. Someone challenges you in the meeting, tries to undermine your position. Old you would have defended immediately, gotten emotional, engaged the attack. New you does something different. You pause, one breath. You observe your own reaction forming. You notice that's my ego. That's my pattern. That's where I usually escalate. And in that noticing, you choose differently. You don't take the bait. You respond to the substance, not the aggression. That's an interesting concern. Let's address it directly. You just flowed around the attack, used the water principle, remained still under pressure, spoke strategically instead of reactively. The person who attacked you just lost leverage. You gained it, all because you've become the silent warrior. The day continues. Crisis emerges. Revenue problem. Client issue. Employee conflict. Something urgent. Average people panic. Start running. Making reactive decisions. Sending urgent emails. Creating more chaos. You do the opposite. You create space. You take a walk. You breathe. You let your nervous system settle. Then you assess. What's actually happening here? What's the pattern? What's the leverage point? And from that stillness, clarity emerges. You see the solution, not through harder thinking, through clearer thinking. You make one decision, precise, strategic. It resolves the crisis, not through force, through flow, through alignment with reality instead of resistance against it. Later, you're in a difficult conversation, maybe with a partner, maybe with a colleague. They're emotional, upset, saying things. Old you would have matched the energy, defended, counterattacked, created escalation. New you observes. You recognize this is their pattern. This is where they go when they're scared. And instead of engaging the emotion, you create space for it. You listen, fully, not waiting to respond, actually listening. You remain still while they express. And something interesting happens. The emotion peaks, then declines. They start hearing themselves, self-correcting, becoming more reasonable. You didn't do anything. Your stillness did everything. The conversation resolves, not through your clever words, through your patient presence. Evening arrives. You review your day, not as judgment, as observation. Where did I operate as the silent warrior today? Where did I slip into old patterns? What did I learn? What will I do differently tomorrow? This practice of self-observation is how integration happens, how temporary behavior becomes permanent nature. You're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to be aware, and awareness, applied consistently, creates transformation. Gradually, inevitably, permanently. Now let's talk about what changes in your results. Because this isn't just about feeling different. It's about achieving different outcomes, better outcomes, elite outcomes. When you operate from stillness instead of chaos, your decisions improve. When you flow instead of force, your efficiency increases. When you observe instead of participate, your positioning advantages compound. When you remain calm under pressure, your influence expands. These aren't theoretical benefits. These are measurable improvements in income, in relationships, in impact, in satisfaction, in power. Average people work hard and get average results because they're working against themselves, fighting their own patterns, creating unnecessary resistance. You work smart and get exceptional results because you've eliminated the internal friction. You're aligned, flowing, operating from the same principles that govern elite performers across every field. Not because you're special, because you've learned what they learned. You've practiced what they practiced. You've become what they became, the silent warrior. Let me tell you about someone who embodies this completely. Dr. Ava Chen. You won't find her name in headlines. She doesn't do TED Talks, doesn't have a podcast, doesn't post motivational content. But in the world of cardiac surgery, she's a legend. Not because she performs the most operations, because she has the highest success rate in the most impossible cases. The surgeries other surgeons won't touch. The patients other hospitals send home to die. That's where Ava operates. And her results are statistical anomalies. But here's what's interesting. It's not her technique that makes her exceptional. It's her operating system. She is, in every sense, the silent warrior. I spent a day shadowing Ava to understand how she works. What I witnessed changed how I think about performance under pressure. The day started at 5:47 a.m. Ava arrived at the hospital before anyone else. But she didn't go to her office, didn't check emails, didn't review patient charts. She went to an empty conference room, sat in a chair, and for exactly 18 minutes she did nothing, just sat, eyes closed, breathing. When I asked her about this later, she said, "People think surgery is about hands. It's not. It's about nervous system. If my nervous system is chaotic, my hands will be chaotic. If my nervous system is still, my hands will be precise. Those 18 minutes aren't meditation. They're calibration. I'm training my body to access calm intentionally before I need it desperately." At 6:15 a.m., she reviewed her surgeries for the day. 3 operations scheduled. The third one was the impossible one. A 63-year-old woman named Patricia. Her aortic valve was completely destroyed. 2 previous surgeries had failed. Scar tissue everywhere. 3 surgeons had refused to operate. Survival probability 32%. Most surgeons would be anxious reviewing a case like this, planning contingencies, running scenarios, fighting with the uncertainty. Ava did something different. She observed the data. Just observed. No attachment, no anxiety, just clear assessment of reality. "The surgery is what it is," she told me. "My anxiety doesn't change Patricia's anatomy. It only changes my performance, so I choose not to carry it." The first surgery of the day was routine, but watching Ava work revealed something profound. The operating room is typically full of tension. Surgeons barking orders, nurses moving frantically, everyone on edge. Ava's OR was completely different, calm, almost meditative. Why? Because Ava's energy set the tone. She moved with precision but without rush. She spoke clearly but without volume. She made decisions instantly but without panic. and everyone around her matched that energy. One of the assisting surgeons told me during a break, "Working with Dr. Chen is different. She never yells, never panics, never blames. If something goes wrong, she just observes it, adjusts, and moves forward. It makes you want to perform at your best, not because you're afraid of her, because you respect her." Between surgeries, most surgeons grab coffee, check phones, decompress. Ava did something different. She found an empty hallway, walked slowly, breathing, observing her own energy. "I'm scanning for residue," she explained. "Did anything from the last surgery create tension in my body? Am I carrying anything into the next one? If I am, I need to release it now, because Patricia deserves a surgeon who's completely present, not one who's still processing the previous case." This is the silent warrior in action, observing internal state, managing energy, creating space. Then came Patricia's surgery, the impossible one. As Ava scrubbed in, I watched her face. No anxiety, no determination, no visible emotion at all. Just presence, complete presence. The surgery began, and within 15 minutes the impossible revealed itself. The scar tissue was worse than imaging suggested. Access to the valve was nearly blocked. The surgical fellow next to Ava started getting tense. You could feel it in the room. Ava noticed immediately. She didn't say anything, just paused, took one breath. That pause rippled through the entire room. Everyone settled. Then Ava spoke, her voice unchanged. "We're exactly where I expected. This is manageable. Let's observe what we have, then choose the optimal path. No panic, no force, just stillness." For the next 4 hours, I watched something remarkable. Ava never rushed, never forced, never fought with Patricia's anatomy. When she encountered resistance, she flowed around it. When the conventional approach didn't work, she observed and adapted. When unexpected bleeding occurred, she didn't panic. She became more still, more focused, more precise. The surgical fellow later told me, "I've never seen anything like it." Most surgeons, when things go wrong, they escalate. More speed, more force, more intensity. Dr. Chen does the opposite. She slows down, becomes quieter, more observant, and somehow that's when she's most effective. It's like watching water move around rocks. There's no fight, just flow. The surgery succeeded. Patricia's valve was replaced, blood flow restored, scar tissue managed. What 3 other surgeons called impossible, Ava made routine, not through superior technique, through superior state management, through operating from stillness instead of stress, through flowing instead of forcing. When we left the OR, I expected Ava to celebrate, show relief, express satisfaction. She did none of those things. She just moved to the next thing, complete, present, unchanged. Later in her office, I asked about her success rate, why it was so much higher than her peers. Her answer was unexpected. Most surgeons focus on technical skill. That matters, but it's not what determines outcomes in extreme cases. What determines outcomes is the surgeon's nervous system under pressure. Can you stay calm when everything's going wrong? Can you think clearly when other people are panicking? Can you make precise decisions when chaos is everywhere? That's not about hands. That's about state, and state is trainable. I've just trained mine more intentionally than most. I asked about her training, how she developed this capacity. "It wasn't natural for me," she said. "Early in my career, I was like every other surgeon. Type A, intense, forceful. I thought pressure required matching intensity. Then I lost a patient, 27 years old, motorcycle accident. The surgery wasn't that complicated, but I was rushing. I was tense. I made a decision too quickly because I felt pressure to act. And he died. Not because the injury was impossible, because I operated from the wrong state. That destroyed me. But it also taught me everything," she continued. "After that, I changed my entire approach. I started studying high performers outside medicine, Navy SEALs, astronauts, Formula One drivers, elite performers who operate in life and death situations with impossible pressure. And I noticed a pattern. The best ones aren't the most aggressive. They're the most still. They don't react faster. They observe better. They don't force harder. They flow smarter. So I started training myself differently. Not just technical skills, state management, nervous system regulation, observation capacity, the ability to remain still when everything around me wants me to panic. Now I train every day, before surgery, between surgeries, after surgeries, at home. I practice accessing stillness intentionally. I practice observing my reactions without attaching to them. I practice flowing around obstacles instead of forcing through them. People think this is soft. They're wrong. This is the hardest training there is. Because you're fighting your own biology. Your nervous system wants to panic under pressure. Your ego wants to force solutions. Your conditioning wants you to react. Training yourself to do the opposite requires more discipline than any technical skill. I asked how other surgeons respond to her approach. Some think I'm too slow, too calm, too passive. They want more intensity, more urgency, more force. But then they see my results. They see patients surviving who shouldn't. They see complications I avoid that they encounter. They see how my team performs better, stays longer, enjoys their work more. And some of them start asking questions, want to learn. Those are the ones I mentor, because they've realized what took me, a lost patient, to learn. The surgeon who can remain still under pressure will always outperform. The surgeon who matches the chaos. Always. The day ended at 8:43 p.m. Ava had performed 3 surgeries, saved 3 lives, one of them impossibly. She should be exhausted, depleted, running on fumes. But when I saw her leaving the hospital, she looked exactly like she did arriving. Calm, present, energized. Not because she's superhuman, because she operates differently. She doesn't fight reality. She flows with it. She doesn't carry tension. She releases it continuously. She doesn't accumulate stress. She processes it in real time. The silent warrior doesn't work harder. They work smarter. And that difference compounds over hours, over days, over careers. Before I left, I asked Ava one final question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who wants to perform at your level, what would it be? She thought for a moment. Then stop trying to be impressive. Start trying to be effective. Stop trying to look confident. Start trying to be present. Stop trying to force outcomes. Start trying to flow with reality. Elite performance isn't about being the loudest, the fastest, the most intense. It's about being the stillest, the clearest, the most aligned. Master your internal state, and your external results will follow. Not eventually, inevitably. Dr. Ava Chen performs maybe 300 surgeries a year. Behind each one is a human who gets to live because she learned what you're learning right now, because she practices what you're about to practice, because she became what you're becoming. The principles aren't theoretical. They're proven. In operating rooms, in boardrooms, in negotiation rooms, in crisis situations. Anywhere high performance matters, these principles work. Not because they're magical, because they're aligned with how reality actually operates, with how humans actually function, with how power actually flows. You're not training to be Ava. You're training to be the version of you that operates from the same principles she operates from. The you that stays still under pressure, that flows around obstacles, that observes before acting, that responds instead of reacting, that builds power in silence, that achieves exceptional results not through force but through flow. That person isn't somewhere in your future. That person is right here, right now, already inside you, waiting to emerge, waiting to be practiced, waiting to become your default, your nature, your truth. Here's what I need you to understand. This transformation isn't complete. It's beginning. Right now you're at the edge. You've learned the principles. You understand the framework. But understanding isn't mastery. Application is mastery. And application takes time, takes repetition, takes commitment. The next 30 days are critical. This is when new behaviors either become habits or fade away. This is when you either anchor this transformation or drift back to old patterns. The choice is yours. And the choice is made daily, moment by moment, interaction by interaction, crisis by crisis. So here's your challenge, your mission, your transformation protocol. For the next 30 days, you're going to practice being the silent warrior. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but consistently, intentionally, every morning 10 minutes of stillness, training your nervous system, building your foundation. Throughout each day, practice the principles. Choose flow over force, silence over speech, observation over participation, calm over panic. When you slip, and you will, just observe. Notice the pattern. Choose differently next time. No judgment, just awareness and adjustment. This is the practice. This is the path. This is how you become. Let me tell you what happens after 30 days. The practices that felt awkward become natural. The choices that required effort become automatic. The person you were trying to be becomes who you actually are. You'll notice people responding to you differently, showing you more respect, seeking your opinion, following your lead, not because you demanded it, because your presence commands it. You'll notice results improving, decisions working out, opportunities appearing, problems resolving easier, not because you got lucky, because you got aligned with reality, with flow, with power. And here's the beautiful part. This is just the beginning. The silent warrior path has no end, only deeper levels, more refined practice, greater mastery. You're not trying to arrive, you're learning to walk, and the walk itself is the destination. The practice itself is the power. The journey itself is the transformation. Every day you become more fluid, more still, more observant, more effective, more powerful. Not through force, through refinement, through consistency, through the compounding effect of right practice over time. Some of you are wondering, what if I'm not capable of this? What if I'm too emotional, too reactive, too impatient? Let me be clear. Every master was once a disaster. Every expert was once a beginner. The difference isn't talent, it's commitment. It's choosing to practice even when it's uncomfortable, even when you fail, even when you doubt. Let me tell you about Marcus, because his story is going to sound familiar, maybe too familiar. Marcus built a tech startup from nothing, raised $8 million in funding, grew to 42 employees, was featured in Forbes as a founder to watch. On paper, he was winning. In reality, he was dying. Marcus operated on one setting: force. Every meeting was a battle to win. Every decision had to be his. Every problem required his immediate intervention. He answered emails at 3 a.m. He interrupted his team constantly. He spoke over people in meetings because he was certain his ideas were better. He wore his exhaustion like a badge of honor. I'm working harder than anyone, he'd tell himself. That's why I'm going to succeed. But the harder he pushed, the worse things got. His CTO quit. Then his head of sales. Then 3 engineers. His board started asking questions. His co-founders stopped returning calls. His wife said, "I don't recognize you anymore." And Marcus? He pushed harder, because that's all he knew. Force, aggression, control, more hours, more intensity, more pressure. The company was hemorrhaging money. The product launch failed. A key investor pulled out. And Marcus had a complete breakdown. Not the Hollywood version, the real version. He was in his office at midnight, alone, crying, unable to breathe, convinced he'd destroyed everything. That was his disaster moment, his rock bottom. The moment every master has before they become a master. Here's what saved Marcus. Not therapy, not a vacation, not a business consultant. It was an old mentor who told him something he didn't want to hear. Marcus, you're the problem, not the market, not your team. Not bad luck. Your energy is chaos. Your presence creates tension. Your leadership style is driving everyone away. You're working incredibly hard to make everything harder. And until you change how you operate, nothing else will change. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, wanted to explain why his mentor was wrong, but he couldn't, because deep down he knew it was true. The mentor gave him one assignment. For the next 7 days, I want you to practice something radical. Stop talking first in meetings. Stop making immediate decisions. Stop forcing solutions. Just observe, watch, listen, see what happens when you create space instead of filling it. Marcus thought this was insane. His company was in crisis. He needed to act, not observe. But he had nothing left to lose. So he tried it. And what happened over those 7 days changed everything. Day 1, Monday morning meeting. Marcus arrived early as usual. But instead of immediately taking control, setting the agenda, dominating the conversation, he just listened. His team was shocked. They kept looking at him, waiting for him to interrupt, to redirect, to override. But he didn't, he just observed. And something interesting happened. His head of product, Sarah, who usually said almost nothing in meetings, started speaking. She had ideas. Good ideas. Ideas that Marcus had never heard because he'd never created space for them. The meeting ran differently, more collaborative. Less tense, people actually solved a problem together instead of waiting for Marcus to solve it for them. Day 2, a crisis emerged. A major client was threatening to cancel. The account rep panicked and ran to Marcus. Old Marcus would have. 1 year later, the same company that was hemorrhaging money and talent became profitable. They retained 98% of their customers. They hired 12 new people. 3 executives who had left came back. Marcus's co-founder re-engaged. His wife said, "I have my husband back." And Marcus himself? He was working fewer hours but achieving better results. He'd lost 15 pounds. He was sleeping through the night. He'd reconnected with old friends. He was present with his kids, not because his problems went away, because he changed how he engaged with problems. He'd become the silent warrior, not perfectly, not without slips, but consistently, intentionally, and it transformed everything. Here's what Marcus told me when I interviewed him for this book. I used to think being a leader meant having all the answers, making all the decisions, driving everything forward through sheer force of will. I was wrong. Being a leader means creating the conditions where others can think clearly, act effectively, and solve problems creatively. And you can't create those conditions from chaos. You create them from stillness, from observation, from strategic silence. I didn't need to work harder. I needed to work differently, and that difference saved my company, my relationships, and my sanity. Now let me tell you about Jennifer. Her story is shorter but equally powerful. Jennifer was a hostage negotiator. Life and death situations, extreme pressure. You'd think her success came from talking, from persuading, from having the perfect words, but she learned something that changed her entire approach. Her breakthrough came during a situation that should have ended in tragedy. A man barricaded in his house, threatening to harm himself. Other negotiators had tried for hours, reasoning, persuading, convincing. Nothing worked. The man was becoming more agitated. Jennifer took over, and for the first 5 minutes she said almost nothing. She just listened, really listened, not waiting for her chance to respond, actually absorbing what he was saying, the pain behind the words, the fear, the desperation. Then she did something that broke protocol. She stopped trying to solve his problem. She just acknowledged his reality. That sounds impossibly hard. I hear you. Silence. Then you're right to be angry about that. Anyone would be. More silence. The man started talking more, opening up, self-correcting. Jennifer stayed still, present, observant. After 40 minutes, he came out peacefully. No force required. No clever persuasion. Just the power of silent, present listening. Jennifer said later, I used to think my job was to change people's minds. Now I know my job is to create space where they can change their own minds. And that space is created through silence, not speech. Through presence, not persuasion. Through observation, not intervention. The silent warrior doesn't win arguments. They create conditions where arguments resolve themselves. These aren't special people. They're people who learned what you're learning right now. They practiced what you're about to practice. They became what you're becoming. Marcus was more reactive than you. Jennifer faced more pressure than you will. If they can transform, you absolutely can. The question isn't capability, it's commitment. The silent warrior isn't someone who never struggles. It's someone who continues practicing despite the struggle, who gets knocked down and stands back up, who loses composure and regains it, who forgets the principles and remembers them over and over, until one day they don't forget anymore, because it's become their nature. You have everything you need. The principles are clear. The practices are defined. The path is mapped. All that remains is the decision. Will you commit to this? Will you practice daily? Will you choose stillness over chaos, flow over force, silence over noise, observation over participation? Will you become the silent warrior, or will you remain who you've always been? The choice is yours, always yours, and the choice you make today determines who you become tomorrow. Here's what I know about you. You didn't listen to this entire audiobook by accident. You're not the average person content with average results. You're someone who senses there's more, who knows deep down that you're capable of greater things, who feels the silent warrior already inside you, waiting to emerge. This audiobook didn't give you something new. It reminded you of something you already knew, something you forgot, something that was buried under years of conditioning and noise and chaos. And now it's awakened. Now it's conscious. Now it's ready to become your reality. The world needs silent warriors more than ever. Because the world is full of noise, full of aggression, full of force, full of people who've forgotten that real power comes from stillness, from flow, from observation, from calm. And when you become the silent warrior, you don't just change your own life. You change every life you touch. You become the calm in others' chaos, the stillness in their storm. The example that shows a different way is possible. You become the leader people follow, not because you're loud, but because you're certain. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're effective. Not because you force, but because you flow. This is your moment, your transformation. You're becoming. Everything you've learned is now part of you. Wu Wei, the water principle, strategic silence, stillness under pressure, the observer's advantage, all of it integrated, all of it accessible, all of it ready to be lived. You are the silent warrior, not becoming, already become. The moment you understand these principles, they become available. The moment you choose to practice, they become active. The moment you commit, they become your nature, so commit now. Say it to yourself, out loud if possible. I am the silent warrior. I move through the world with stillness and flow. I observe before I act. I respond instead of react. I build power in silence. I remain calm under pressure. I adapt like water. I see what others miss. I am becoming unstoppable, not through force, through flow, not through noise, through silence, not through chaos, through stillness. I am the silent warrior, and my transformation begins now. Welcome to the path. Welcome to power. Welcome to your true nature. The silent warrior doesn't announce themselves. They don't need to. Their presence speaks. Their results prove. Their impact echoes. And now that's you. Not someday. Today. Not partially. Completely. You are the weapon, sharpened, ready, unstoppable. Go be what you've always been. Go do what you were meant to do. Go change what you were born to change. In silence, in stillness, in flow. The world is waiting, and you're finally ready.